Hello YouTube and welcome back to Old Maryland 63 C10. This is episode 15, and in this episode we're going to be reinstalling the front suspension on our truck, so stay tuned for that. Just a quick editorial note, I was planning on showing how I put together the control arms and the bushings and then assembled the suspension, but the video got way too long. So I put out a video on how I put together the control arms. So in this video, I tried to edit out as much of the references to those parts of the video that I originally planned to get in. So excuse me if I have a few mistakes going through. I don't know if I got them all out. But anyway, let's get started with the video. Okay, so the first thing we're going to try to do is get the cross member back up into the frame. If you remember from the powder coating episode, I did decide to have them take this apart. They recommended it, and I'm glad I did. Got cleaned up much better than if it had stayed in one piece. So the one thing I learned in putting the rear suspension back together is the powder coating does add a little bit of thickness to obviously whatever it's coating. So in some cases in the back, some of the tight tolerances were even more tight and broke my heart, but sometimes had to take a little file and just kind of knock down some of the powder so things would fit together. I've seen online where people had a hard time getting their cross members back up into the frame. With the powder coating on both sides of where the metal's going to meet, I figured if it's going to be a pretty tight tolerance to start, it's going to be even tighter with the powder on it. So I took a ratchet strap to try to pull the front frame rails together a little bit to be able to get it up in there a little easier. I didn't put one back here. I don't know if I need to or not. So we're going to try with the front and see what that does. And if not, we'll either put another one on or try to crank this one down a little bit more. Okay, I'll take that. Let me see if I can get some bolts started. Okay, at least got a bunch of bolts started so we can take the jack out, make sure it's sitting in there right, get the rest of them started, tighten them down. So now that the control arms are assembled, we'll go and get them on the frame. So I had originally taken this, one of these little donuts, I guess they're called, the spacers, and had taped them with the shim. So if you remember from one of the earlier videos, when I was taking it apart, I had everything taped up to make sure it all went back in the same place. And actually this driver's side didn't have a shim, it just had the bolt, which of course when I got my Moog control arm bushings, they came with new bolts. So this one's the driver's side front that I taped up before. And unlike the donuts, I didn't paint these, and they are really cruddy, and it's kind of a shame to put these back on the frame. But now with removing the cross member, new bushings, all these things, the truck's gonna need a front end alignment. So I didn't really want to take the time to paint these and clean them up if they're just going to be replaced later. Again, I did paint the donuts, and I had pulled off, I guess it's a little shim or something that helps hold the stud on from this side. I did paint all that up, painted the studs, actually drove the studs back through with a wooden dowel. They went in fine. So, but I didn't do the shim, so they look kind of ugly. So apologize up front for the nastiness of those things. But they just slip on there like that. We'll slide our control arm on. And then I did put a little anti-seize on the other side when I was putting it together. Again, I'm not sure if it needs that, but like I said, I know it's going to come back apart a little bit to be able to, I know it's going to come back apart a little, or at least loosened to do the front end alignment. So I figured I'd at least put some coating on there just to maybe make it easier when they do the front end alignment. So not much, just a little bit. Okay, so then these get torqued down. In the Moog direction, it said 65 pounds. In the manual, it said 70 pounds. So I have my torque wrench set to 65, and then we'll just give it an extra click or two, but it should be enough to get us there. Okay, let's do the bottom one and be ready for springs. Now we're moving on to the lower control arm. And just as I had mentioned when I was setting up the bushings, the dimple for the rivet goes in the front, the shock mount goes to the back. And just a side note, this was one of the changes I made when I was prepping the frame and where ran into a little bit of issue with the powder. I upgraded to the later model. I think these are square body U-bolts, and you can see the difference between the original one and the new one. It's quite a bit beefier U-bolt. I saw a lot of people recommend doing this on the forums. It's not like I'm going to be out, you know, racing this truck around or, you know, doing slalom races or anything like that, but it's a simple upgrade and just gives you a little bit more stability, because I had heard people having problems with these braking. Now, what I learned when I went to open up the holes, I didn't want to just take a bigger drill bit and drill a bigger hole, because this inside diameter here should be the same for the cross shaft. So actually the holes need to widen out. Plus I wanted to move it forward a little bit from the frame if I could, because these bolts are so much bigger compared to the originals. You know, you can see the size difference. I was worried about getting a socket on this bolt up against the cross member. So I was trying to bring the hole out and then forward from the cross member, or backwards from the cross member. So I got a die grinder and was opening the holes up instead of just drilling. And with the powder coating, I had opened them just enough to get the bolt through. And with powder coating, that extra thickness, again, as much as I hated to do it, had to scratch a little of the powder coating off to get the bolt to go through. So put a little dabs of paint in there. I don't know if it matters. But yeah, so that was one thing I learned. Again, trying to move the holes forward and out in order to make it fit close to the same place. I should have made them a little bit bigger to give me a little bit more clearance. So we're pretty close here with getting this one in. We'll just go ahead and put this in. And again, I might still need a tap of a hammer. Okay, so the smaller U-bolts, I think only get about 45 pounds. These get 85. And again, if I didn't mention in the beginning, these are, I think, square body, 75 and up, but they get 85 pounds. Okay, So that takes care of this control arm. So we need to move the frame around a little bit to set up my brace to be able to put the springs in, and that's next. Okay, so I've moved my chassis around to be able to get my bracing to get on the front of the chassis to go up to the rafters in my barn, because again, none of the motor sitting in it, so I need a weight or something to hold the frame down while I compress the spring. So we're gonna go ahead and try to get the spring in with the spindle and get this side wrapped up. So with these springs, this piece clocks into a pocket here in the lower control arm, and the top of these CPP springs are different than the originals. The originals, this was kind of almost like a D shape to fit on the I guess the cup that's up in the top of the frame, where these are just round. So I'm gonna basically go by clocking it at the bottom and fit it in the top. It worked out okay. I do know, again, comparing this to the original spring, it looked like the D was a little bit further in or out, depending if it was driver or passenger. I remember reading somebody else on the forum had a problem with these springs hitting the inside of their control cross member. So hopefully that won't be the case. So we'll go ahead and sit this, and I'll start it in the bottom and then jack it up and hopefully get it in the top. I can see the spring is seated in the lower control arm in the right place, and I could kind of feel as I was lifting the spring into the cross member that it was pretty much on that, I guess in that cup that's up inside here. I'll double check it before I tighten everything down with a flashlight. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the spindle on the lower control arm ball joint and just thread this nut on it a little bit just to get it started. Pull it down just a little bit so I know that it's on there. So we still got a little ways to go to compress the spring. Keeping an eye on my bracing to make sure the bracing doesn't fall out. Now that this castle nut can start, we can start tightening up the castle nuts to compress the spring. Okay, I'm gonna let the jack down. Moog says to torque the bottom ball joints to 65 to 75 pounds and the uppers to 55 and 65. So I'm going to set my torque wrench at the 65 and the 55 range, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to click, and then I'll go another quarter turn or however far, I'll tighten it to get the key open or the hole for the cotter pin. So we'll take it to the lower end, but then tighten it that extra little bit to get it to where we can put in the cotter pin. Okay, we got to go another maybe 1/8 of an inch to get the opening for the pin. So that'll just give us a little bit more torque. Oh, there we go. And I thought I had my pair of pliers, but I'll have to do that in a second. So let's do the top one. Let's back our torque wrench down to 55 and do the same process. There we go. Okay, so let me get my pliers and bend those over, and this will be all done. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap this video up right here. Went ahead and put the backing plates on. Where are they? Over here. I put the shock on, and And like I said, I think that's where I'm going to wrap up. I don't want this video to get too long. I know I had a couple missteps or words when I was doing this video because it's cold up here in the barn. I don't have a heated barn. And I have a lot more painting to do for the rest of the suspension pieces and the steering pieces. And it's going to get bitter cold in here in Maryland in the next couple days. So I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be able to really paint here for a while. So I wanted to get this one out just so people can see where we are, getting the cross member back on, upper and lower control arm, spring, spindles, shocks, and the backing plate. So tune in next time. We'll get the steering going, get the steering box on, get the brakes on, and hopefully finish up the front suspension. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you're hopefully getting something out of our videos, and we'll see you next time working on the steering in our process of rebuilding Hang. Thanks.